us who drive on two wheels. The odds are 5 times as great that we'll reach this silent city as it is for those who drive on 4. Years of careful research have taught us many of the reasons for that deadly 5-to-1 ratio. Item. In spite of the rapidly increasing number of motorcycles, the average motorist is still not used to them, doesn't expect them around, and isn't really looking out for them. So the cyclist is faced with the same serious problem of not being seen that faced the drivers of small foreign cars when they first appeared. Even when a motorcycle is seemingly in plain view, even a small object raised in front of the driver's eyes can completely block out a cycle directly in front of him.
According to the Insurance Information Institute, the III, nearly 5,000 motorcyclists died in collisions in 2018 alone. Now, this number did decrease from 2017's numbers of riders killed, but motorcyclists are still 27 times more likely to die in a crash compared to people in a regular motor vehicle who get into a wreck. To determine riders' odds against getting into an accident, we can look at how many motorcyclists are registered compared to how many get into collisions and suffer injuries as a result. In 2018, the III reported that there were 8,666,185,000 motorcycles registered in the United States. Of those motorcyclists, 82,000 were injured and 4,985 died. This brings the assumed number of total accidents to 86,985. The CDC calls motorcycle accidents an important public health concern, and their annual total economic cost, including medical care and lost productivity, is estimated to be $12 billion. Mississippi is the most fatal state for motorcycle accidents, followed by Texas and South Carolina, and speeding accounts for about 34% of motorbike accidents. And when it comes to a motorcycle crash that leads to the driver literally watching their own heart explode out of their chest, we look no farther than Loaf and his hit 1979 single,
I'll come crawling on back to you.
Hello, all you high school Hellcats, and welcome back to Heard It in a Love Song, the show where we take a ride to the past to find out the history of a love song we all know and love. My name is Richard Hunt, and as we enter the 4th and final week of
Splatter Platter September,
we take a look into the collective efforts of Marvin Meatloaf Aday and his partner in crime, Jim Steinman, as they bring to life their own take on a teenage tragedy song, Bad Out of Hell. We start our story in Dallas, Texas on September 27th, 1947. That is where and when we meet up with police officer Orvis Wesley Aday and his schoolteacher wife, Wilma Artie Aday. These two just brought into the world Marvin Lee Aday, a name he would legally change in 1984 to Michael Lee Aday. 4 days after he was born, he was still bright red, and the doctors advised his parents to keep the baby at the hospital until his condition improved. He slept in a plastic crib, and for the name tag, his father asked a nurse to write meat, because he looked like 9.5 pounds of ground chuck. The name tag indeed read meat, and that became his childhood nickname. Now, that might be a cute little nickname from anyone else, but I would be lying to you if I said that Orvis was a good father. Now, Meat's family ran large. Orvis weighed 350 pounds, and living up to his nickname, Meatloaf was 185 pounds by the time he hit 5th grade, which climbed to 240 pounds by the 7th grade. And while that would go on to help him belt out tunes later in life, school was definitely no place of refuge for young Meat. Oh man, I was tormented, he said in an interview with the Rolling Stone. And while school was no refuge, life at home wasn't any better. His father was a violent alcoholic who would disappear for days at a time. He'd return and slap his boy around, or throw him through a screen door, and just vanish again. Whereupon Meat and his mom would hop into the car and go from bar to bar, trying to find him and bring him home again. In between his bouts of alcoholic tantrums, Orvis was a gospel singer, along with his wife Wilma, so they introduced a love of singing to Meat. Wilma, who actually sang in a gospel quartet, used to say to him, "Good thing you're not going to be a singer, because you can't carry a tune in a bucket." But he claims that all that changed in his sophomore year while he was out on an athletic field, when a 12-pound shot put sailed 62 feet through the air and hit him in the head. And just like that, while trying out for choir, he discovered that he suddenly had a 3.5 octave vocal range. In 1965, Meat graduated from Thomas Jefferson High School, having already started his acting career via school productions such as Where's Charlie and The Music Man. And after attending college at Lubbock Christian College, he transferred to North Texas State University, now the University of North Texas. His mother passed away of cancer in 1966 when Meat Loaf was just 19. He was so gripped by grief that, according to Classic Rock magazine, during his mother's funeral, he grabbed her body and screamed at the undertakers, "You can't have her." Shortly after the funeral, his father, drunk and bereft, kicked open his bedroom door and came at him with a butcher knife for reasons unknown. I rolled off the bed just as he was going to put that knife right in the mattress. I fought for my life, and apparently I broke 3 ribs and his nose. I left the house barefoot in a pair of gym shorts and a t-shirt. Meat Loaf would never return home. It was also at this time that Meat continuously ignored his draft notice. He'd intentionally gained about 60 pounds in an unsuccessful effort to fail his physical. After he received his inheritance from his mother's death, he rented an apartment in Dallas and isolated himself for about 3.5 months until a friend found him. And a short time later, he went to the airport, and like many artists we've discussed so far, he made his way to Los Angeles. There he found work as a bouncer and started his first band, Meat Loaf Soul, a band which went through a variety of names including Popcorn Blizzard and Floating Circus. And while the band's name changed frequently, they began to develop a good-sized regional following as a result of opening for visiting acts like the Stooges, the Winter Brothers, as well as The Who, Grateful Dead, and Janis Joplin. The regional success led them to release a single, Once Upon a Time,
And breathe against the wind. Think mountains don't pretend. This once upon a time began.
backed with Hello. But after several lineup changes and name alterations, the band split up. 2 years later, Meat was working as a parking lot attendant, and on the job, he met an actor who encouraged him to try out for the musical Hair. Meat landed the role of Ulysses S. Grant. With the publicity generated from Hair, Meat Loaf was invited to record with Motown. They suggested he do a duet with Sean "Stoney" Murphy, who had performed with him in Hair, to which he agreed. The production team in charge of the album wrote and selected the songs, while Meat Loaf and Stoney came in only to lay down their vocals. The album, titled Stoney and Meat Loaf, with Meat Loaf misspelled as one word, was completed in the summer of 1971 and released in September of that year. A single released in advance of the album, What You See Is What You Get,
Ain't no way for you to make no guilty person out of me.
reached number 36 on the best-selling soul singles chart. The same chart is now titled Hot R&B/Hip-Hop Songs, and 71 on the Billboard Hot 100. To support their album, Meat Loaf and Stoney toured with Jake Wade and the Soul Searchers, opening for Richie Havens, The Who, Stooges, Bob Seger, Alice Cooper, and Rare Earth. But when Motown replaced him and Stoney's vocals from the one song he actually liked, Who Was the Leader of the People, with new vocals by Edwin Starr, Meat Loaf left, and in December of 1972, Meat Loaf, casted as Buddha, was in the original off-Broadway production of Rainbow at the Orpheum Theater in New York. After the tour, Meat Loaf rejoined the cast of Hair, this time on Broadway, and after he hired an agent, he auditioned for the Public Theater's production of Jim Steinman's More Than You Deserve. During the audition, he sang a former Stoney and Meat Loaf favorite of his, I'd Love to Be As Heavy as Jesus. And subsequently got the part of Rabbit, a maniac that blows up his fellow soldiers so they can, quote, go home. Ron Silver and Fred Gwynne were also in the show. In the summer between the show's workshop production, he appeared in a Shakespeare in the Park production of As You Like It with Raul Julia and Mary Beth Hurt. In 1973, Meat Loaf was cast in the original L.A. Roxy cast of the Rocky Horror Picture Show, playing the dual parts of Eddie and Dr. Everett Scott. 2 other cast members from More Than You Deserve were also part of this cast. Graham Jarvis playing the narrator and Kim Milford playing Rocky. Richard O'Brien was concerned that Meat Loaf may not be able to handle Hot Patootie, Bless My Soul. O'Brien brought out the music and handed it to him, saying, It's okay to flub a few lines. No one in the London cast has ever sung the whole thing correctly. He looked at it, replied, "What's the problem?" then sang the whole thing without skipping a beat. The problem was that most of Hot Patootie is a flurry of multisyllabic words strung together quickly. For example,
I used to go around Chicago and listen to the music on the radio. The saxophone was blowing on a rock and roll show.
the success of the musical led to the filming of the Rocky Horror Picture Show, in which Meat Loaf played only Eddie and not Dr. Scott. A decision he said made the movie not as good as the musical. I said, "You're making a huge mistake," and I still think they did. Even though the actor was fine, the way they did it in the play was Eddie and Dr. Scott really looked alike because they were the same person, so you knew it was his nephew, and I was a really good Dr. Scott. According to Meat Loaf, preparations for the motorcycle scene led to several on-set accidents. His stuntman drove the motorcycle through the scene, including up and down several steep ramps, and the bike fell off the top tier and landed upside down, pinning the stuntman underneath. Meat Loaf ran over and lifted the heavy bike just enough to move it off of him, and the stuntman did not move for quite some time, but eventually he opened his eyes and told everyone he was okay. To get shots of Meat Loaf riding the bike up and down the ramps, the crew rigged a wheelchair that would hold a set of handlebars and a motorcycle windshield in front of the camera as the crew pulled it up and down the steps. In the middle of shooting, the wheelchair hit a ridge at the bottom of the steps, setting him flying. His stuntman tried to catch him, but the ramp caught the stuntman's leg and caused a serious fracture. Meat Loaf also got a deep cut on his forehead. Also, according to Meat Loaf, Elvis Presley was the studio's first choice to play Eddie, and apparently Elvis actually expressed some interest in the role.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
During his recording on the soundtrack for Rocky Horror, Meat Loaf recorded 2 more songs. A cover of Benny King's Stand By Me,
Darling, stand by me.
and Clap Your Hands.
Well, clap your hands and stamp your feet. Lose yourself inside the beat.
They remained unreleased until 1984, when they appeared on B-sides to the Nowhere Fast single. In 1976, Meat Loaf recorded vocals for Ted Nugent's album Free For All. When regular Nugent lead vocalist Derek St. Holmes temporarily quit the band. Meat Loaf sang lead on 5 of the album's 9 tracks.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Meat and Steinman would tour together with the National Lampoon Roadshow in 1975, with Meat there as John Belushi's understudy. It was there the pair would meet Ellen Foley, more on her later, and Meat and Jim would meet up again later as the pair settled down in New York's Ansonia Hotel to work on a project that would change their lives forever. But let's not get ahead of ourselves.
For if it's something I want, then it's something I need. I wasn't built for comfort, I was built for speed.
We start this part of our story on November 1st, 1947, in Hewlett Harbor, New York, about an hour outside of New York City, which was also the childhood home of Stan Lee. This is where and when we meet up with Louis and Eleanor Steinman, as they welcomed into the world a baby boy, James Richard Steinman. Jim was born into a pretty well-to-do household, as his father owned a steel distribution warehouse, first in Brooklyn, then later in California, while his mother taught Latin. Growing up, he rode his bike from his Hewlett Harbor home to Green Acres Mall in Valley Stream and bought records at Sam Goody's, produced by rock and roll legend Phil Spector,
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
and others that featured the classic music of Richard Wagner. He would come home and stand in front of the mirror impersonating opera singers. And when he was 7 years old, Jim Steinman went to see a fortune teller. It was in Times Square, New York. But for the rest of his life, he never forgot her words. You will spend your life in an ultimately self-destructive drive and a relentless ambition to astonish people. The first rock band he ever loved was The Doors. He worshipped Jim Morrison, his otherworldly aura in particular. When he auditioned to join a band in college, he played the entire keyboard solo of Light My Fire. The Doors were his gateway drug to artists like Hendrix and Cream.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Then came Blue Cheer and the Fugs. The first band of his own was a Fugs and Blue Cheer covers band, but Steinman soon moved on to composing music for theater. In March 1968, he contributed music for an Amherst College adaptation of Bertolt Brecht's A Man's a Man. In May 1968, he directed an Amherst production of Michael McClure's The Beard. Over the summer of 1968, he contributed music for an adaptation of Brecht's Ball by the Island Theater Workshop on Martha's Vineyard. As a senior at Amherst College in Massachusetts, he wrote the book, music, and lyrics for The Dream Engine, completing it in April 1969. The Dream Engine, set in a satirical dystopian 1969, is the story of a young boy named Ball who, along with his fellow rebels, doesn't accept the restraints and limits of their society. Ball is the leader of the self-assembled group of wild boys called the Tribe. whose mortal enemies are Max and Emily, the parents of the girl, a young woman with whom Ball has fallen in love. Steinman himself played Ball, while an additional call went out to fellow students for the remaining roles of the production. Barry Keating, serving as the co-creator and director, also played the role of the historian/narrator and worked extensively with Jim to compile the books for the production, often shouting lines from the audience and sourcing heavily from their earlier work with Brechtian form and tropes. The play was presented at the Amherst campus's Kirby Theater in April 1969 and transferred to nearby Holyoke for a small handful of performances, infamously drawing the attention of local authorities for its ensemble-wide display of nudity in the finale, an element that was begrudgingly muted for the off-campus performances. Several motifs, lyrics, and monologues from the show appear in songs Steinman later released, for himself or for others. For example, the lyrics from Total Eclipse of the Heart can be heard in the song titled The Formation of the Tribe. This was originally a reference to the blast flash of a nuclear explosion, and the full monologue that was later recorded to open You Took the Words Right Out of My Mouth, parentheses, Hot Summer Night.
On a hot summer night, would you offer your throat to the wolf with the red roses?
Will he offer me his mouth?
Yes.
Is delivered in a love scene between Ball and the girl.
On a hot summer night, would you offer your throat to the wolf with the red roses?
Will he offer me his mouth?
Yes.
Upon his graduation from Amherst, Steinman signed up with Joe Papp's Public Theater, where he toiled away on musicals, including a collaboration called Ubu with the puppeteer Demian in an adaptation of Wagner's Das Rheingold. Despite this, Steinman's first success arrived through pop, when Yvonne Elliman
Oh, Yvonne? Yeah. Oh, damn, hold up. That's a French-ass name, Yvonne. Yeah, my little croissant.
recorded his happy ending for her 1973 album, Food for Love.
Don't you know I'm anticipating my happy ending?
From the collaboration with Papp, another musical was born. Originally titled Souvenirs, it became More Than You Deserve, co-written by Michael Weller. The story is set in Vietnam during the war in a non-combat camp run by a commander who is impotent. The commander falls in love with a reporter set to cover the camp, who turns out to be a nymphomaniac. In 1977, a brief workshop was held for a work-in-progress musical titled Neverland. Adapted largely from the Steinman/Keating source material developed for the Dream Engine, and also loosely sourced material from Peter Pan by J.M. Barrie. Meatloaf has joked about this, claiming he thinks I'm Tinkerbell. The three main songs of Neverland were Bat Out of Hell, Heaven Can Wait, which was originally demoed by Bette Midler,
Heaven can wait, and a band of angels wrapped up in my heart.
and The Formation of the Pack, which was retitled All Revved Up with No Place to Go. Jim Steinman originally wanted Kim Milford to sing Bat Out of Hell, but later changed his mind. Soon Steinman and Meatloaf recognized the gem of a rock and roll album hidden within Neverland, so they decided to write that album together. So now that we are caught up on their stories, let's move on. Steinman and Meatloaf put together some demos, however no label decided the album was worth the investment, which would prove to be a trend. It was over the top, but Jim Steinman is quoted as saying, "If you don't go over the top, you can't see what's on the other side." Not only was the album a hard sell because it was over the top, the songs were just super long. The original full version of Bat Out of Hell was nearly 10 minutes. This was shortened to be about 8 minutes, and what would become the shitty radio edit is only about 5 minutes. Eventually Steinman connected with Todd Rundgren, who was delighted with the demos and decided to produce the record. Steinman recalled the album playback as the loudest thing I've ever heard. The speaker was right in front of his baby's crib, and the baby was only 3 weeks old. I was really worried for the baby. Todd, the baby! And he yells, "It's my fucking house!" Like, the baby's gotta learn. Steinman also recalled the house in Woodstock where Meatloaf and Meatloaf's then-girlfriend, singer Ellen Foley, stayed during the recording. The house was said to be haunted. Someone had convinced Meat that there was a ghost in the room he was staying in, and he was very, very scared, so I had to go and literally sit on the foot of the bed at night and talk to him until he can go to sleep. Ellen would be sleeping, completely oblivious, and I'd say, "It's not a bad ghost, Meat. I've been talking to people, and it's a very musical ghost," and he would drift right off. And then when he finally fell asleep, by mistake he would turn over to Ellen, and there would be a shriek, and he'd be convinced it was a ghost all over again. Ellen would go on to say the following about Meat. Growing up in a bumfuck Texas town, he might have become a serial killer or the guy who shot up the local 7-Eleven. But the first time I saw him, he walked in with this incredible bravado and confidence. Like in his mind, he was already fully formed. He had this will that allowed him to do what he had to do to survive and exercise a lot of his demons through music. But there's a lot of sadness and anger, which is pretty much at the core of what he does. When Meat described his relationship with Steinman, he said, "We don't know each other, we are each other. They were more than friends, more than brothers. They were soulmates." He was generous beyond scope, but he was also selfish. He'd have 18 dozen donuts, and I'd go, "Can I have one of those donuts?" And he'd be like, "Oh, I don't know about that." But Meatloaf had something that Steinman really wanted, the spotlight. He wanted to be a rock star. Recording started in late 1975 in Bearsville studio, Woodstock. Roy Bittan and Max Weinberg, the pianist and the drummer from Bruce Springsteen's E Street Band, played on the album, in addition to members of Rundgren's group Utopia, Kasim Sultan, Roger Powell, and John Willie Wilcox. Edgar Winter played the saxophone on All Revved Up. Rundgren himself played guitar, including the motorcycle solo on Bat Outta Hell, and both Steinman and Rundgren were influenced by Phil Spector and his Wall of Sound. According to Meatloaf, Rundgren put all the arrangements together because although Jim Steinman could hear all the instruments in his head, Steinman hummed rather than orchestrated. But no matter the effort and amount of wildly talented musicians on the tracks, the fish were not biting. Albert Grossman, who had been Bob Dylan's manager, offered to put it on his Bearsville label, but needed more money. Rundgren had essentially paid for the album himself. Mo Ostin, at Warner Brothers, was impressed, but other senior people there rejected them after they performed it live. Stephen Van Zandt arranged to contact Cleveland International Records, a subsidiary of Epic Records. After listening to the spoken word intro of You Took the Words Right Out of My Mouth, Steve Popovich accepted the album as Cleveland International Records' first album. They have also released recordings from Ronnie Spector, B.J. Thomas, Ian Hunter, Slim Whitman, and the Irish Rovers, among others. Rundgren initially mixed the record in one night, however some of the mixes were unsuitable to the extent that Meatloaf didn't even want Paradise by the Dashboard Light on the album. Jimmy Iovine, who had mixed Springsteen's remix 2 out of 3 Ain't Bad, and after several attempts by several people, John Jansen mixed the version of Paradise by the Dashboard Light that is on the album now, along with All Revved Up with No Place to Go. According to Meatloaf, he, Jansen, and Steinman mixed the title track together. Phil Rizzuto's baseball play-by-play call for Paradise by the Dashboard Light
Here's the throw. Here's the play at the plate. Holy cow, I think he's gonna make it.
Stop right there!
was recorded in 1976 at the Hit Factory in New York City by Rundgren, Meatloaf, and Steinman. As an Italian Catholic, Rizzuto publicly maintained he was unaware that his contribution would be equated with sex in the finished song. However, Meatloaf asserts that Rizzuto claimed ignorance only to stifle criticism and was fully aware of the context of what he was recording. Jim Steinman would say, "We went to Yankee Stadium in 78 or 79. I remember we were in the dugout. Phil Rizzuto comes running into the dugout from off the field, yelling at us. He goes, 'Steinman, Meatloaf, you huckleberries, why didn't you tell me this was dirty? The nuns are never going to forgive me. Oh, they won't leave me alone at church about this.'" And he's really religious. He says, "Everyone is telling me, didn't you know that's, the kids are having sex in the car? Oh, holy cow. I'll never get over it. I'll never get over it. My kids love it, though. My kids? They like it more than my baseball sportscast. I'll always remember that, though, you huckleberries. You didn't warn me about this." Ellen Foley, who recorded all the main female vocals, was not available when it came time to tour for the album, so Carla DeVito took her place. In the various promotional music videos for the songs on Bat Outta Hell, Carla DeVito lip-syncs to Ellen Foley's album vocals. You Took the Words Right Out of My Mouth is musically inspired by the rock chords of The Who's Baba O'Reilly, with a Phil Spector-style melody on top. The song 2 out of 3 Ain't Bad
Don't be sad. Don't be sad. 'Cause 2 out of 3 ain't bad.
was written in direct response to actress Mimi Kennedy asking Jim Steinman whether he could write a simple song like Elvis Presley's I Want You, I Need You, I Love You.
I want you, I need you, I love you.
Todd Rundgren identifies that the song was influenced by the Eagles, who were very successful at the time, citing the line,
There ain't no Coupe de Ville hiding at the bottom of a Cracker Jack box.
he says, "You can get away with that lyric only in a Meatloaf or Eagles song," with Jim Steinman talking about the song saying, "Then musically, I always felt the inspiration for that song was kind of country because I love country music. More old country music like from the 50s, Hank Williams and Patsy Cline. It was that country music that makes you want to take a shower because the dust is all over you. I love country music lyrics because they had a love of words and because country music was so damn dark. It was so desolate. I love dark music, and I always thought that got overlooked in country. How dark, I mean. I don't think you can get through Hank Williams'
I'm so lonesome I could cry
without needing, a Prozac or something. That's as despairing a song as there is. It always sounds to me like a lonely coyote just howling and, a dusty moonlit night. The melody was country when I was first doing it. I was like, I want you, I need you, but there ain't no way I'm ever gonna love you. Now don't be sad, cause 2 out of 3 ain't bad. It was kind of like a Johnny Cash thing. It was definitely that feel in my head, but it just turned poppier somehow. We made it pop. More pop than rock and roll, but in my head, it was like Johnny Cash on a lonely road with roadkill surrounding him singing backup. For Crying Out Loud was originally written for the 1975 New York Shakespeare Festival Kid Champion. Comparing the album to Steinman's late 1960s musical The Dream Engine, Classic Rock magazine says that Steinman's imagery is revved up and testosterone-filled. Songs like Paradise by the Dashboard Light, 2 out of 3 Ain't Bad, and For Crying Out Loud echoed the textbook teenage view of sex and life. Irrepressible physical urges and unrealistic romantic longing. Steinman's songs for Bat Out of Hell are personal but not autobiographical, with him saying, I never thought of them as personal songs in terms of my own life, but they were personality songs. They were all about my obsessions and images. None of them take place in a normal world. They all take place in an extreme world. Very operatic. They were all heightened. They don't take place in a normal reality. Steinman is credited with the album cover concept, which was illustrated by Richard Corbin, who is best known for his artwork in the series Heavy Metal. The cover depicts a motorcycle ridden by a long-haired man bursting out of the ground in a graveyard. In the background, a large bat perches atop a mausoleum that towers above the rest of the tombstones. In 2001, Q magazine listed the cover as number 71 in its list of the best 100 record covers of all time. Steinman had wanted equal billing with Meatloaf on the album's title. He wanted it to be called Jim Steinman Presents, or Jim and Meat, or vice versa. But for marketing reasons, the record company wished to make Meatloaf the recognizable name. As a compromise, the words Songs by Jim Steinman appear relatively prominently on the cover. Meatloaf believes that this is probably the beginning of their ambivalent relationship. Bat Out of Hell was released by Cleveland International Records in October 1977. However, at Cleveland International's parent label, Epic Records, almost everyone hated it. Steve Popovich, the head of Cleveland International, was relentless in his efforts to get Epic and all of CBS Records and radio on board. In 1993, Steinman reflected that the album was timeless in the sense that it didn't fit into any trend. It's never been a part of what's going on. You could release that record at any time, and it would be out of place. Due to the enthusiastic response to the music videos from the record, Australian and British audiences were the first to develop interest. The BBC television program The Old Grey Whistle Test aired a clip of the live band performing the 9-minute title track, and according to Classic Rock magazine, the response was so overwhelming that they screened it again the following week. They later invited the band to perform Paradise live. As a result, in the UK, Bat Out of Hell became an unfashionable, uncool, non-radio record that became a must-have for everyone who heard it, whether they got Steinman's unique perspective or not. And while the album was not an immediate hit in the US, it continues to sell about 200,000 copies per year and has sold an estimated 50 million copies worldwide, including about 14 million in the United States and over 1.7 million in Australia, where it is the country's highest-selling album as of 2016, being certified 25 times platinum. The album also stayed on the UK album charts for 522 weeks, making it the UK's third longest charting studio album behind Fleetwood Mac's Rumours and Pink Floyd's The Dark Side of the Moon. But let's talk about what we are here for, the titular Bat Out of Hell.
And I think somebody somewhere must be tolling a bell.
Bat Out of Hell was inspired by teenage tragedy songs such as Leader of the Pack, Terry, and Tell Laura I Love Her, the latter being the first single Jim Steinman ever bought. Steinman wanted to write the most extreme crash song of all time, with him saying, "There is something so thrilling to me about the operatic narrative that involves a cataclysmic event, especially one so perfectly in tune with a teenager's world and rock and roll as a car or motorcycle crash." Now, like I have mentioned, Bat Out of Hell was a big part of Jim Steinman's vision of a dark twist on Peter Pan. In the musical, the character of Ball describes to Wendy what Neverland feels like. The sirens are screaming and the fires are howling. The song then focuses upon a pure girl, which Sounds magazine commented is always an important symbol.
Wherever you are and wherever you go,
This ain't what's gonna be some light.
Q Awards 2008 with Classic Song Award. Paul Rees, Q's editor-in-chief, said, "There are some songs that transcend such things as time and genre." On Top Gear's Top 5 Ultimate Driving Songs, as voted by the audience, and it is ranked below Queen's Don't Stop Me Now,
Shooting star leaping through the sky like a tiger, defying the laws of gravity.
and Golden Earrings, Radar Love.
We've got a thing that's called radar love. We've got a wave in the air. Radar love.
Producer Tom Rundgren told Mojo magazine in February 2009 of Bruce Springsteen's influence on the Bat Outta Hell album. Jim Steinman still denies the record has anything to do with Springsteen, but I saw it as a spoof. You take all the trademarks, overlong songs, teenage angst, handsome loner, and then turn them upside down. If Bruce Springsteen can take a song over the top, Meatloaf can take it 5 stories higher than that. And at the same time, he's this big, sweaty, unappealing character. Yet we out-Springsteen Springsteen. He's never had a record that sold like Bat Outta Hell. Nearly every record label said Bat Outta Hell would never work.
Are you sure about that?
But Bat Outta Hell conquered. Bat Outta Hell comes in at 173 beats per minute. Of all the teenage tragedy songs, Bat Outta Hell is the most special to me. Growing up as a chubby kid who loved to sing, Meatloaf was kind of an idol to me. In high school, I even started growing my hair out to donate it, with the added bonus that my hair was long and straight like his, prompting my dad to call me Meatloaf for a while. There is literally nothing quite like not only Bat Outta Hell, but the album it's named after, and the duo of Meatloaf and Jim Steinman. They are on par with Prince and David Bowie in terms of how ethereal they are, as well as their music. Bat Outta Hell really nails the feeling of what it feels like to be so lost in love, you are just absolutely not paying attention to the world around you, despite how deadly it may be. This week's Love Homework is a teenage tragedy song with a bit of a twist. There is a love story, sure, but the narrator is in love with himself, to the point that he thinks himself immortal until he crashes into a tree and dies. The Living End by the Jesus and Mary Chain. Now, I want to be very clear that this is only part 1 of Meat and Jim's story, so look forward to the future for a part 2. If you like what you learned and you'd like to continue learning, please drop a like below and absolutely subscribe if you haven't. Subscribe, hit the bell, and look forward to Fridays when I drop a new episode. Until next time, my name is Richard Hunt, and
And you heard it in a love song.